Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Euromoney Private Banking Awards of 2022. My name is Victoria Scholar and I'm the Head of Investment at Interactive Investor. We're the UK's largest flat fee investment platform. We have over 400,000 customers and over £55 billion of assets under administration. I'm also a regular television and radio commentator on all things investment and financial markets related. Thank you so much for inviting me to this prestigious awards tonight. I'll be walking us through this evening, presenting you guys with the awards, and I hope sharing a little bit of insight into the wider banking and finance world that we're all here to celebrate. Now, the awards are a culmination of the annual Global Private Banking and Wealth Management Survey, which provides a qualitative review of the best services in private banking by region and by area of service. The survey is completed by private banks and wealth managers to identify the firms that they consider to be their top competitors. We appraise the views of senior private banking and wealth management practitioners with a perspective on the relative merits and demerits of their bank and its competitors. The survey garners thousands of responses every year, and we've got over 2,000 responses this year. Our team of researchers and analysts pass through an enormous amount of data and identify the best banks at a global, regional, and at a country level as well. As you all know, the results of the survey were announced in February, so hopefully no nasty surprises tonight. Now, I hope that as many of you as possible walk away with an award tonight, and despite close proximity, ideally without COVID. Because this is the first actual in-person event that we've had since before the pandemic. It was before we even knew what the pandemic was, back in February of 2020. That's before we knew what things like spike proteins were, antigens, incubation periods, and immune responses. Most of us didn't even know what these words were, or at least I hadn't heard them at least. Now we all consider ourselves as expert epidemiologists, discussing our viral loads over coffee with friends, or comparing the pros and cons of lateral flows versus PCRs. Imagine us back in 2019 trying to listen into these conversations. How the world has changed. Now, you might be wondering why there was no password to get into this room, or why my lips seem to be syncing so perfectly with my audio, or why I don't keep cutting out or freezing, and perhaps why I didn't accidentally start this speech on mute. So, in case you're confused, and I wouldn't blame you if you were, but we're not on Zoom, and this is not a virtual background behind me. This is the actual Savoy Hotel in the centre of London. So you can actually touch people, but don't touch people, because that's a whole nother story that we don't have time for tonight. It is a real privilege to be standing here tonight in front of so many of you, and I'm really, really grateful to Euromoney for organising tonight and inviting me to be the host. We have a fantastic evening lined up for you. Obviously, we have a lovely dinner, which we'll be serving in not too long, don't worry. And then we have a keynote address from the incredible British financier, Baroness Helena Morrissey. And a bit later, I'll be handing out the awards to all the successful winners. And after that, there'll be a wonderful opportunity for all you ladies and gentlemen to network with one another with plenty of drinks, so lots to look forward to. So I've been told to speak very briefly about myself, but I'll keep it brief. As I said, I'm the head of investment at Interactive Investor, and I'm a commentator on financial markets on TV and radio and in podcasts as well. I have a regular slot on Sky, BBC, LBC, Times Radio, and France 24. Stop showing off now. I also do a lot of event hosting for things like this, as well as panel moderating and interviewing experts in the industry, so plenty to keep me very busy. So how did I get here? Well, about 14 years ago now, just a few months ahead of the global financial collapse, no less, I was a bright-eyed, ambitious teenager reading economics at university, and I did what everyone else was doing and decided to apply to some banking internships. Now, after a whole host of painful numerical tests, written tests, every blimmin' test you could possibly imagine, I was overjoyed to receive what I thought could be the internship of my dreams. Wait for it. Dear Victoria, we're delighted to offer you a place on the Capital Markets Internship Programme in the summer of 2008 at Lehman Brothers. Couldn't wait to get stuck in. Anyway, I don't need to tell you what happened next, but in case you've forgotten, let's just say the offer didn't exist for much longer as the banking industry went into free fall with Lehman Brothers filing for Chapter 11. But things haven't worked out too bad for me in the end. I'm here now and I've enjoyed some great jobs along the way. After working in capital markets at Nomura, I was a financial journalist and a TV producer. I worked at CNBC at its flagship morning show, Squawk Box, and I've also worked for Bloomberg, BBC, and CNN, which got me really excited about the world of broadcasting from a financial angle. Now, from the beginning of 2020 to today, in just over 2 years, a relatively short space of time in the grand scheme of things, how the world has changed. Some changes that make complete sense and have made the world a better place, other changes that are frankly rather strange. So let's start with some of the wackier developments. I mean, who would have thought that Elon Musk would be the new boss of Twitter, firstly? Everyone seems to be a crypto investor these days. Apparently 3.3 million people in the UK now own Bitcoin. Dogecoin, which started out as a joke, has now become a legitimately traded cryptocurrency. And Elon Musk says he plans to introduce an option to pay with Dogecoin on Twitter. People have started buying and selling digital art or NFTs. The most expensive one, called Pax the Merge, was bought for almost $100 million at the end of last year. No physical materials involved. Oh, and then there was the guy who paid $2.9 million for an NFT of Jack Dorsey's first tweet, who lost almost all of it at the point of sale. And what about the meme stock craze? Dying companies like GameStop and AMC collectively bid up by the so-called Reddit army, who hyped up these stocks online in an attempt to catch the hedge fund heavyweights offside. And soon, we're all going to be living in the metaverse, of course, a 3D virtual model world of the internet, a place parallel to the physical world where you spend your digital life. Somebody reportedly paid $630,000 to become Snoop Dogg's digital neighbor. They do know he won't be there, right? Enough madness now. What about some of the more sensible changes that we've seen? Well, firstly, Trump isn't president, for one. That's one good thing. And working from home, that seems to be a big one. Home offices are finally getting widespread acceptance. Good for flexibility, good for parents, and good to avoid being sandwiched between another human and a tube door at 7 a.m. on the commute. And then this big change is having knock-on implications for real estate, with office demand under pressure, while we're seeing residential demand for big houses and gardens really booming. And what about the way we shop? Well, e-commerce has clearly exploded, while malls have really struggled. Netflix, well, until last week, and other streaming services have been outpacing cinemas, which have been in an existential crisis. And we've all become extremely impatient when it comes to grocery shopping. We expect our milk, bread, and most importantly, our wine within the touch of a button straight to our doorstep. No leaving the house required. How dare Deliveroo take 20 minutes? I mean, geez. And what about the markets over the last 2 years? Well, we had that brutal sell-off in the first quarter of 2020. In fact, it was the worst plunge since the financial crisis in 2008. But after the initial panic plunge, there was a rather generously paced recovery. In fact, it was the fastest bull market recovery since World War II, with US markets doubling from the lows in roughly a year. We saw stay-at-home stocks like Zoom and Netflix and Deliveroo all very much in favor among investors as the poster child stocks of the pandemic. Then we had the first milestone vaccine that was announced in November of 2020. That provided another big boost for markets. But now the shift was away from those stay-at-home stocks and towards the reopening trade instead, with companies like airlines and hotels and cruises all very much back in vogue. But the post-COVID reopening brought about supercharged demand, coupled with problems with the supply chain, and that created this big imbalance and resurgence in inflation, one of the big buzzwords of the moment. At first, we hoped that inflation might be transitory, but clearly inflation is here to stay for a while, prompting the end of cheap money and central bank stimulus. How the world has changed. Now, this year was meant to be a stellar year for the global economy post-COVID. A lot of city firms gearing themselves up for bumper deal-making and a revival of corporate earnings. But 2022 has already posed a series of challenges, with the war in Ukraine exacerbating the inflationary backdrop, with rising interest rates, and with the cost of living crisis. And now China's latest COVID outbreak as well, and its zero-tolerance policy, meaning that its economic prowess is fading. There is one silver lining for you guys, though. At least this time, unlike 2008, the bankers aren't to blame. So you can just sit back and watch as the global economy implodes. I think that's enough from me for now. I'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you all have an incredible evening, and I look forward to speaking to lots of you at the networking drinks. So before service, before we get to dinner, I'd like to invite the Euromoney private banking editor to the stage to say a few words on behalf of the organisers. I'll see you all after dinner, but for now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Elliot Wilson.